Liam! Outside the door, I heard hurried footsteps. You called me? His voice came from just beyond the door. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Yes, I need your help with something, I said, feeling my voice waver with embarrassment. What is it? Are you okay? Liam asked, his tone full of concern. I sighed softly, feeling the heat rising to my cheeks. I ran out of toilet paper, I said quickly, as if speaking any slower would stop me from saying it at all. There was a brief silence outside. Then, I heard Liam chuckle quietly. I am Sophia, 28 years old, often described as beautiful and mature beyond my years. I used to think happiness was finding a man who loved me and building a warm, small family together. When I met James, it felt like my life veered onto a path I had never imagined. James was unlike any man I had ever met. He wasn't the youthful, romantic, or impulsive type. Instead, he was calm, accomplished, and exuded the confidence of a man who had experienced life. At nearly 50, James gave me a sense of security and stability that a 28-year-old like me deeply craved. When he proposed, I didn't hesitate to say yes. But I knew that stepping into this marriage wasn't just about loving James. He had been through a failed marriage, and his first wife, Liam's mother, had passed away when their son was just 8 years old. Our home is in the suburbs, spacious and tranquil, with a large garden shaded by lush green trees. Every morning, I wake up to the sound of birds chirping and the gentle sunlight streaming through the window. I usually make myself a cup of coffee, sit on the porch, and watch Buddy, Liam's loyal dog, frolic around the yard. At first, life here felt like a dream. James was a thoughtful husband, always trying to spend time with us despite his busy schedule. Liam, James's 20-year-old son, was full of energy, friendly, and cheerful. Yet, the age gap between Liam and me made me feel awkward during those first days of living together. I wondered whether he would accept me as part of the family, or merely see me as an unwelcome outsider. Fortunately, Liam wasn't what I feared. I remember the first time he addressed me. "Hello, Miss Sophia," he said politely, but not distantly. "You don't need to be so formal," I said with a smile, trying to ease the tension. "Just call me Sophia." Liam smiled back, and I saw warmth in his eyes. He didn't keep his distance as I had imagined. On the contrary, he actively helped me around the house, taking out the trash, cleaning, and fixing small things like the broken chair in the kitchen. Family dinners became warmer over time. Even though my husband was often away for work, Liam and I made an effort to maintain a sense of family. Buddy, ever loyal, was a constant presence in those moments. One day, as I was watering the plants in the garden, Liam approached me from behind. "Do you need any help?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with care. I shook my head gently, but he still took the watering can from my hands. "I just want to help," he said, his gaze so sincere it left me flustered. I looked at him, feeling a determination that I couldn't refuse. Perhaps he truly wanted to help as part of his family duty. From then on, we grew closer. I began to see him as a younger brother, a friend within the family. During James's business trips, Liam and I took care of Buddy, cleaned the house, and sometimes cooked meals together. But life is never as perfect as it seems on the surface. James, though he loved me, couldn't spend much time with the family because of his busy work schedule. New projects, extended business trips, all of it made me feel lonely in this very home. One time, as James was getting ready to leave, I said, "Can you stay home just one more day? I want us to spend some time together." James looked at me, his eyes filled with guilt. "I'm sorry, Sophia, but work won't allow it." He hugged me, but that embrace couldn't erase the loneliness inside me. On the days James was away, I often sat by the window, gazing out at the quiet garden and wondering if this was the life I had dreamed of. I loved James, but was that love enough to fill the emptiness he unintentionally left behind? Liam, with his youthfulness and energy, brought a fresh sense of life into the house. His presence made me feel less lonely. He wasn't just a carefree young man. He became a friend, someone I could share everything with. I told myself that I would take good care of this family. James, Liam, and Buddy. They were all people I wanted to devote my heart to loving and protecting. But little did I know, an unexpected incident was about to change everything. That afternoon began like any other. Liam and I were preparing a simple meal in the bright kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating Liam's cheerful face as he maneuvered the frying pan with eggs on the stove. "Careful, or it'll burn," I said with a gentle laugh. "Don't you trust me?" Liam replied, smiling playfully. I shook my head and flipped the bread in another pan. We chatted and laughed, the warm atmosphere of a family filling the space. Lunch ended amidst our bursts of laughter. Buddy lay beside the table, his eager eyes gleaming as he waited for a treat. I gave him a small piece, and Liam chuckled, saying I spoiled the dog too much. But just as we finished cleaning up, a sudden stomach pain hit me. "Liam, can you finish tidying up? I need to use the restroom," I said hurriedly, clutching my stomach. "Are you okay?" Liam asked, his voice laced with concern. "I'm fine, probably just ate too fast," I replied, rushing to the restroom near the kitchen. Sitting there, I made a startling discovery. The toilet paper had run out. I sighed, overwhelmed with embarrassment. What should I do now? James wasn't home. Only Liam was here. But how could I ask him for help in such a situation? I sat there, debating for a long time. Left with no other choice, I reluctantly called out, "Liam!" Outside the door, I heard hurried footsteps. "You called me?" Liam's voice came from just outside. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Yes, I need your help with something," I said, my voice trembling with embarrassment. "What is it? Are you okay?" Liam asked, his tone full of worry. I sighed softly, my cheeks burning. I ran out of toilet paper," I blurted out quickly, as if speaking any slower would stop me from saying it altogether. There was a brief silence outside. Then I heard Liam chuckle lightly. "All right, I'll get it for you," he said, his voice tinged with humor. I buried my face in my hands, wishing I could disappear into the ground. But there was no other option. I had to wait. Liam returned quickly with a fresh roll of toilet paper in hand. "Open the door a little so I can pass it in," he said. My heart raced. What should I do? If I opened the door, I would have to crawl out to grab it, and in my current state... Swallowing hard, I decided to open it just a crack. "Step back a little," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I tried to hold up my half-lowered pants with one hand and reached for the door latch with the other. The door clicked open slightly. But just then, I lost my balance. A small yelp escaped my lips as I fell to the floor. "Are you okay?" Liam exclaimed in alarm, pushing the door open without thinking. We both froze in that moment. I lay on the floor, my wide eyes staring up in panic, while Liam stood rooted to the spot, his face turning bright red. Can I help you up?" he stammered, his eyes darting between me and the door, unsure of what to do. Quickly, I used my hands to cover the exposed parts of my body, the embarrassment surging to unbearable levels. No, get out!" I shouted, my voice breaking with mortification. Liam turned around instantly but hesitated at the door. "Are you sure you don't need help?" he asked, still concerned. "I said no, just let me handle it," I snapped, my tone sharper than usual. Without another word, he closed the door behind him. I sat on the floor, my face buried in my hands. My heart pounded erratically, and my mind swirled with a whirlwind of chaotic thoughts. That evening, the atmosphere in the house grew strangely heavy. Liam tried to act as though nothing had happened, but I could sense the awkwardness in his gaze. And me? I couldn't focus on anything. Every time I looked at him, I was reminded of the incident earlier in the day, and my face would flush with heat. "Are you okay?" Liam asked as we sat together in the living room watching TV. Yes, I'm fine, I replied, my eyes glued to the screen as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. But deep down, I knew I wasn't fine at all. I kept telling myself it was just an accident, nothing serious. So why couldn't I shake off the embarrassment every time I thought about it? Liam wasn't doing much better. I caught him stealing glances at me more than once, his gaze different than before. It was no longer the gaze of a young man looking at a family member, but the gaze of a man looking at a woman. He spoke less during meals and would often blush when I asked him something. I tried my best to maintain a natural atmosphere, but things were no longer the same. In the days that followed, I kept reassuring myself that everything would return to normal. But deep down, I knew things had changed irrevocably. I tried to ignore Liam's glances, but I couldn't deny there was something different about him. His gestures, his words, they made me feel like I was both his stepmother and yet not. And I realized that I, too, had begun to change. Since that incident, I noticed Liam wasn't the same carefree, lively young man I used to know. His eyes, his words, his actions, all of them were different. I tried to convince myself it was just lingering awkwardness after an unfortunate situation. But the way Liam looked at me told a different story. One afternoon, I was tidying up the living room, the golden glow of the setting sun stretching across the wooden floor. Buddy lay lazily beside the chair, his eyes half closed. I was busy wiping down the shelves when Liam walked in, bringing with him an air of quiet energy. "Do you need help?" he asked, already reaching for the cleaning cloth on the table. "No, it's fine. You can rest," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But Liam didn't let me decline. He grabbed the cloth and started dusting the table. "You seem tired lately," he said, his tone calm but laced with concern. I smiled faintly, feeling a bit flustered. "I'm fine. It's just that there's a lot to do around the house," I answered. He paused, looking at me intently, as if trying to find something hidden within me. "You don't have to do everything alone. I can help you," he said, his voice softer and warmer than usual. I didn't reply, only nodded slightly and turned away to avoid his gaze. But I could feel it. The way he looked at me, with care, and something else. That evening, as I sat by the window, staring out into the hazy night, Liam walked in with 2 steaming cups of tea. "I saw you sitting here for a while and thought you might get cold, so I brought some tea," he said, placing a cup on the table beside me. I smiled, thanking him. "Have you been troubled by something lately?" he asked while sitting across from me. I hesitated. "Not exactly. It's just that, sometimes, life feels like it's missing something," I replied, my voice unconsciously soft, like a whisper. Liam looked at me, his eyes deep and searching. "You know," he began, his tone hesitant as if weighing every word, "you're the kindest and most beautiful woman I've ever met." His words felt like a gentle breeze brushing against my heart, making my face flush involuntarily. "Don't say that. I'm just an ordinary person," I replied, trying to mask my embarrassment. "No," Liam shook his head, his voice more serious now. "You don't realize how special you are. Dad is so lucky to have you." His words left me flustered. I didn't dare look into his eyes, only managed a faint smile, but my heart pounded uncontrollably, faster than I could manage. In the days that followed, I noticed Liam becoming increasingly attentive to me. He always found ways to stay close, helping me with small tasks, and sometimes bringing me little gifts. A bunch of wildflowers from the garden, a cup of coffee in the morning, or a wool scarf when the weather turned cold. Once, as I was struggling to fix a broken desk lamp, Liam appeared out of nowhere and sat down beside me. "Let me handle it," he said, already taking the lamp in his hands. I looked at him, feeling my heart sink slightly. Not because he was helping me, but because of the way he looked at me. His gaze was so warm and gentle that I didn't know how to react. One evening, as we were watching a movie in the living room, Liam suddenly spoke. "Do you ever feel lonely?" he asked, his voice soft but full of meaning. I froze for a moment, unsure of how to respond. "Sometimes," I admitted, my voice as light as a whisper. "Me too," he replied, his eyes fixed on the screen, as though he were speaking more to himself than to me. I looked at him, feeling a faint sadness spread through my chest. "But you know," he said, turning to face me, his eyes filled with determination, "I'm always here for you." Those words, so simple yet so powerful, made my heart melt. I didn't know when it started, but I began to look forward to moments spent with Liam. The small conversations, the stolen glances, the thoughtful gestures. They all gave me a feeling that was new, strange, and yet deeply laden with guilt. And I realized that it wasn't just Liam who had changed. I was no longer the same person I used to be either. I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment when the closeness between Liam and me crossed the boundary of a normal relationship. It started with small gestures, but over time those gestures became a thread that tied us together tightly. Liam was no longer just my husband's stepson. He was someone I spoke to every day, someone I shared small joys with, someone who made me feel cared for in a way I hadn't felt in years with Mark. But what troubled me most were the conflicting emotions inside me. I knew I shouldn't think of Liam that way. He was my husband's son, a young man with his whole future ahead of him. Yet every time he looked at me, with that warm, steady gaze and that gentle smile, I couldn't help but feel a stirring in my heart. One rainy evening, Mark was away on another business trip. I sat on the sofa, a light cardigan draped loosely over my shoulders. Buddy lay curled up at my feet, listening to the soft patter of rain on the roof. Liam came downstairs holding a cup of hot tea. "You're still awake?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. "I'm not sleepy yet," I replied, smiling. "The rain? Couldn't sleep either?" "I didn't want you to sit here alone," he said, placing the cup of tea in front of me before sitting down beside me. The distance between us was so small I could feel his warmth. The room fell silent, the only sound the rain outside the window. "You're so kind," I said, feeling a bit self-conscious. "You don't need to thank me," Liam replied. "I just want you to feel like you're not alone." His words made me pause. In that moment, I realized that Liam wasn't just a son in this family. He had become someone I leaned on, naturally and unconsciously. One evening, Liam invited me to the garden to stargaze. The sky was clear, the air cool, and the heavens sparkled with countless stars. "Look at this. The sky is so beautiful tonight. It would be a waste to just stay indoors," he said, his eyes fixed on the heavens above. "Yes, it is," I replied, feeling a peaceful warmth standing next to him. "Have you ever wanted something more in life?" Liam asked, turning to look at me. I remained silent for a long moment. "Maybe a happy family," I admitted, "but sometimes I feel like there's something missing, something I can't quite name." Liam stood still, his expression soft yet serious. He stepped closer to me, his eyes filled with both tenderness and determination. "You deserve that, Sophia," he said, his voice firm, almost like a promise. My heart raced. Those words, his gestures, they made me feel valued in a way I hadn't felt in so long. As time passed, the bond between Liam and me grew deeper. He found ways to be near me, helping with small tasks, and cherishing the quiet moments we shared. Moments where we didn't even need words, yet everything felt right. But with that closeness came an ever-growing fear in my heart. Every time I looked in the mirror, I asked myself, what am I doing? Is this how a wife should act? What would Mark think if he knew? Those questions haunted me relentlessly. I loved my husband. Mark was a good man who had given me a home, a stable life. but at the same time I felt an emptiness around him that I couldn't ignore. Liam, on the other hand, made me feel alive. He was young, genuine, and cared for me in a way I hadn't experienced in years. But it also meant I was crossing a line that, once crossed, there would be no going back. One evening, as we sat on the sofa, Liam suddenly asked, "Sophia, have you ever thought about what it would be like if things were different between us?" I froze, unsure of what to say. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to mask my unease. "I don't know," he admitted. "It's just, I think about you more than I should." His words made my heart stop. I looked at him, seeing a deep sadness in his eyes, but also an unshakable sincerity. "You shouldn't think that way," I replied, my voice trembling. "I know," he said, lowering his gaze, "but I can't stop myself." Those words, that sincerity, left me at a loss. I knew I should stop this, that I should keep my distance, but my heart told me otherwise. Liam stepped closer, his eyes holding something I couldn't describe. "Do you know how much you mean to me?" he whispered, his voice almost pleading. I didn't respond, but I could feel the warmth from him, the closeness I hadn't felt with anyone else besides Mark. And then, at some point, the distance between us disappeared. Liam gently took my hand, his eyes searching mine for permission. I didn't say a word, but my gaze was answer enough. His kiss, initially soft, deepened, becoming more earnest. I could feel all his sincerity and longing in every movement. My heart felt like it was about to burst. I knew I had crossed a line, but I couldn't stop myself from embracing it. That night, I couldn't sleep. My heart raced wildly, and chaotic emotions overwhelmed my thoughts. Liam's kiss lingered on my lips as if it hadn't ended. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to find some peace in my thoughts. Instead, all I could see was Liam's eyes, the sincerity, the yearning he had shown me. I knew this was wrong. I knew I shouldn't feel this way, but my heart, like a traitor, kept pulling me toward him. How did I let things go this far? I asked myself, guilt filling my chest. I thought about Mark. He was a good husband who had given me a stable, fulfilling life. But was that really all I wanted? In all my years with Mark, I had never felt loved the way Liam made me feel. The next morning, when I walked down to the kitchen, Liam was already there, preparing breakfast as he always did. He smiled when he saw me, but in his eyes, I noticed a hesitance, as if he was waiting to see how I would react. "Did you sleep well?" he asked gently. I nodded, though the truth was, I hadn't slept at all. "Liam," I began, but I didn't know what to say next. "I'm sorry," he interrupted, his expression turning serious. "I know what happened last night was wrong, but I can't stop myself. I can't stop thinking about you." My heart broke. His words, the pain in his voice, made me feel both love and hatred for myself. "We can't do this, Liam," I said, trying to maintain my composure. "I know," he replied, but his eyes said otherwise. In the days that followed, I tried to keep my distance from Liam. I told myself it was necessary, that if I didn't, things would only get worse. But the more I tried to avoid him, the more I became aware of his presence in my life. Liam didn't give up either. He found every small way to be close to me, whether it was a light touch when handing me a glass of water, a gaze that lingered longer than it should, or a seemingly casual remark that carried an undercurrent of emotion. One afternoon, I was sitting in the garden reading when Liam walked out, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. "You need to take a break," he said, placing a glass in front of me. I smiled, trying to hide the turmoil in my heart. "Thank you," I said, my eyes fixed on the book to avoid his gaze. Liam sat down beside me without a word. The silence between us was filled only with bird song and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. "Are you happy?" he asked, breaking the silence. His question made me freeze. I didn't know how to respond. I think I'm living a life that many people dream of, I replied, my voice growing quieter. But it's not the life you truly want, he said, as if he could see right through me. I turned to look at him and saw a rare seriousness in his eyes. I don't want to see you sad, Sophia, he said, his voice trembling. I want you to be happy, truly happy. His words, the sincerity in his tone, broke through the walls I had built around myself. I felt tears rolling down my cheeks, but this time I didn't try to hide them. Liam gently took my hand, his eyes filled with everything I needed but couldn't admit. You're not alone, Sophia. I'm always here, he whispered. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, Liam knocked on my door. I can't sleep, he said, his voice heavy with worry. I just want to make sure you're okay. I looked at him and saw a deep sorrow in his eyes that I couldn't ignore. Come in, I said, my voice trembling. Liam stepped inside and closed the door. He stood there, silent, but his eyes spoke volumes. I'm sorry, he said, stepping closer to me. I know I shouldn't, but I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop loving you. I don't know what I did. I don't know what I said. All I remember is his kiss, his embrace, and the way the entire world seemed to disappear in that moment. In Liam's arms, I felt like a real woman, loved, cherished, desired. But with that came a deep fear. I knew I was crossing a line I could never return from. Yet in that moment, I didn't want to stop. The days following that fateful night, everything in the house seemed to change. The atmosphere remained peaceful, the familiar surroundings unchanged. But between Liam and me, everything had shifted. Every light touch, every glance carried an indescribable weight, a mix of happiness, longing, and profound fear. Liam and I both knew that what we were doing was wrong. But that very fact made everything even more enticing. Every moment together felt like a dangerous game, both thrilling and fraught with risk. One morning, Mark announced he would be away on a 3-day business trip. As soon as I heard the news, my heart raced. 3 days without Mark at home meant 3 days of slightly more freedom for Liam and me, but at the same time it filled me with anxiety. Could we keep everything discreet? On the first day, Liam and I tried to act as normal as possible, like any other day. We cleaned the house and prepared lunch together. Yet, with every movement, I could feel Liam's eyes on me, and every touch of his hand carried a different meaning. When I bent down to grab some vegetables from the fridge, I felt warmth behind me. Liam had stepped so close that his breath was palpable. "Do you need help?" he asked, his tone calm, but his eyes betrayed an intensity that was hard to ignore. I turned around, realizing how dangerously close we were. "No, I can manage," I replied, trying to steady my voice, though it quivered slightly. Liam said nothing, but his gaze lingered. I quickly turned back to focus on the cooking, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. That evening after dinner, I sat on the sofa reading while Liam went upstairs to play video games. I thought things would settle, but not 10 minutes later, Liam appeared in the living room. "I can't sleep," he said, his eyes searching mine for a reaction. I smiled faintly but said nothing. He approached and sat beside me. The silence between us was so thick that I could hear our breathing. "Will you sit with me for a while?" Liam asked, his voice soft but full of yearning. I intended to refuse, but his eyes melted my resolve. I nodded, setting my book aside, and followed him upstairs. In his small room, Liam played a soft tune. The warm yellow light made the space feel cozier. We sat next to each other, saying nothing, but the silence spoke volumes. Suddenly, Liam turned to me, his gaze filled with emotion. "I don't know how to stop thinking about you," he said, his voice trembling. I didn't know how to respond. My heart pounded, and before I could say anything, Liam wrapped his arms around me. We held each other in silence, yet the air between us was tumultuous. I knew this was wrong, but I couldn't push him away. I felt the sincerity, the yearning in his embrace, and I couldn't resist. The next morning, as I brewed coffee, Mark called via video from his hotel. I was talking to him when Liam came downstairs. He stopped as soon as he saw me on the phone, a flash of worry crossing his face. "Liam!" I called out, trying to sound normal. "Your father wants to talk to you." Liam stepped closer, forcing a smile, but I could sense the tension in his movements. "Hi, Dad," he said evenly, though his eyes flicked toward me nervously. Mark didn't seem to notice anything unusual. However, both Liam and I knew we had been too reckless. That night, when Mark called again, I was in Liam's room. The ringing phone startled us both, and I rushed back to my room to answer it. "What are you doing?" Mark asked casually. "Just reading," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. When I returned to Liam's room, he stood by the door, his eyes clouded with concern. "We can't keep doing this," I said, my voice shaking. "I know," Liam replied, but his eyes said otherwise. A week later, Mark returned home unexpectedly early. Liam and I were in the kitchen, laughing as we prepared dinner. "You've spilled flour on your shirt," Liam said, chuckling. I glanced down at the tiny smear and laughed softly. But as I lifted my head, I saw Mark standing in the doorway, his eyes filled with suspicion. "Mark!" I exclaimed, startled. "Why are you back so soon?" "The project wrapped up earlier than expected," he said, his tone calm, though his gaze never left us. Liam quickly left the kitchen, leaving me alone to face Mark. My heart pounded, as though every secret I held had just been exposed. That night, after Mark had gone to bed, I went to Liam's room. "We have to be more careful," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I know," Liam replied, his eyes resolute. "But I can't stop loving you." I said nothing, just stared at him silently. I knew this couldn't go on, but I also knew I wasn't ready to let go. That afternoon, Mark unexpectedly announced that he would return home earlier than planned. I received a message from him while preparing dinner with Liam. The words, "I'll be home by 7 p.m., wait for me," flashed on my phone screen, sending a wave of unease through me. My heart raced, anxiety bubbling up, but I forced myself to appear calm. Liam, standing beside me, noticed the change in my expression. "Dad's coming home early?" he asked, his voice tinged with hesitation. I nodded, trying to muster a smile. "Yes, your dad will be home by 7, I said, though my voice trembled slightly. Liam's eyes flickered with worry, but he quickly composed himself, adopting a neutral demeanor as if the news didn't bother him. In the remaining time before Mark's return, Liam and I continued preparing dinner, but everything seemed to slow down. Every touch of our hands, every shared glance, carrying a weight neither of us could ignore. "Are you nervous?" Liam asked softly as I set the table. I paused, looking directly at him. "Yes," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Liam stepped closer to me, standing so near I could feel his presence. He looked as though he wanted to say something but stopped himself. The way he looked at me, with tenderness and intensity, made me want to bury all my guilt. When the clock struck 6:45 p.m., I hurriedly told Liam to head upstairs. "You should stay out of sight for a bit," I said, my voice fraught with worry. Liam gazed at me, his eyes shimmering with emotion. "I understand," he said quietly, before quickly leaving the kitchen, leaving me alone with the dinner and my tangled thoughts. The sound of a car engine in the driveway made me jump. I hurriedly adjusted my hair, checked the kitchen one last time, and went to the door to greet Mark. "Hello, darling," Mark said as he stepped inside, placing his suitcase on the floor before turning to embrace me. "You're home so early. I wasn't expecting this," I said, trying to keep my tone even. Mark smiled warmly, but in his gaze, I detected a glimmer of suspicion, a flicker of something I hadn't noticed before. At dinner, Mark sat at the head of the table, recounting his work trip. I tried to maintain a natural demeanor, responding to his questions with smiles and simple replies, but Liam's silence cast a heavy pall over the atmosphere. "What's wrong with you?" Mark suddenly asked, turning his attention to Liam. "Nothing. I'm just a bit tired," Liam replied, his voice subdued. Mark said nothing more, but I could tell he was observing us carefully. After dinner, Mark decided to stay in the living room to watch television. I cleaned up in the kitchen while Liam retreated to his room. It seemed like the evening would pass uneventfully, but then Mark called out loudly, "Sophia, come up here for a moment." My stomach knotted as I quickly dried my hands and ascended the stairs. Mark was standing outside Liam's room, his expression clouded with suspicion. "Have you seen the dog anywhere?" he asked, his tone low but firm. I froze before shaking my head. "It's probably in the yard," I said, trying to redirect his attention. Mark stared at me for a long moment, as if deliberating, then turned and went to his own room. I exhaled deeply, but my heart continued to race. Liam had locked his door just in time, and I knew he was inside, listening intently to every sound. When everything seemed to have calmed down, I decided to check on Liam. Knocking softly on his door, I waited only a few seconds before he opened it. "Sophia, I'm sorry," Liam said immediately, his eyes filled with worry and regret. I placed a hand on his shoulder, speaking gently to reassure him. "It's fine, everything is okay," I said, though my voice betrayed my tension. We stood there in silence for a moment before Liam stepped closer, his eyes filled with an earnestness I couldn't deny. "I don't want to hurt you, but I love you," he said, his voice trembling yet resolute. Before I could respond, Liam pulled me into an embrace, his warmth and rapid heartbeat enveloping me. I couldn't fight my emotions any longer, but at that moment, the sound of footsteps echoed up the stairs. "Is anyone still awake?" Mark's voice rang out, shattering every emotion within me. Liam and I froze, neither of us daring to move. Mark's footsteps creaked on the wooden stairs, each sound counting down the seconds to our discovery. Liam's door was unlocked, and when Mark pushed it open, he froze at the sight before him. I couldn't bring myself to look directly at Mark, but I could feel the weight of his disappointment, the fury simmering beneath his expression. "Sophia." "Liam." Mark's voice was low, as if a bomb were about to detonate. I stepped back, my legs barely able to hold me up. Liam stood still, his gaze fixed on the floor, unable to meet his father's eyes. "Sophia, explain this to me," Mark demanded, his tone a mixture of icy coldness and deep anguish. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The house fell into a suffocating silence, broken only by our heavy breathing. The room fell into an oppressive silence after Mark spoke. I stood there, motionless, unable to utter a word of explanation. Liam didn't move either, his eyes fixed firmly on the floor. Waves of guilt surged through me, relentless and overwhelming, pulling me into a deep ocean of shame. Mark took another step into the room, his eyes no longer just filled with disappointment, but now simmering with quiet anger. "Sophia, what do you have to say for yourself?" Mark asked, his voice so low and steady that the air itself seemed to freeze. I swallowed hard, trying to arrange my thoughts, but everything in my mind was a tangled mess. I'm sorry," I stammered, my voice trembling like a child caught doing something wrong. Mark stared at me, his gaze piercing, before turning to Liam. "And you, Liam? Explain this to me. I want to hear it from you," he demanded, his calm tone carrying an almost unbearable weight. Liam took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He lifted his head, meeting his father's gaze head-on. "I'm sorry, Dad," Liam said, his voice laced with genuine remorse. "But I love her." The confession struck Mark like a knife to the heart. He closed his eyes, attempting to suppress his emotions, but I could see his fists clenching tightly at his sides. "Love?" Mark repeated, his voice dripping with bitterness. "Do you even understand what you're saying? She's my wife." Liam didn't flinch, his gaze growing more resolute. "I know it's wrong, but I can't control my feelings. I love her, Dad." Mark turned to look at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and disbelief, as if silently asking how I could betray him this way. "Sophia, what did I do wrong? Why would you do this to me?" he asked, his voice breaking. Tears streamed down my face as I struggled to find an answer. I couldn't deny the feelings I had for Liam, but neither could I ignore the hurt I had caused Mark. "Mark, I can't justify what I've done," I said, my voice cracking. "I was wrong, but these feelings, I can't deny them either." Mark turned away, pacing a few steps as if trying to make sense of everything. He stopped, exhaled deeply, and looked back at us. "I don't know what to do now," Mark said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I trusted you, Sophia, and I trusted you too, Liam." The days that followed were eerily quiet in the house. Mark avoided both me and Liam, speaking little but revealing his pain through every gesture. Liam and I tried to maintain our distance, but our hearts refused to ignore the bond we had formed. One evening, Mark called me into his study. He sat behind the desk, his expression stern but devoid of the anger that had been there before. "Sophia, I need you to make a decision," Mark said, his voice unnervingly calm. "Do you want to stay with me, or do you want to leave with Liam?" The question hit me like a punch to the chest. I had known this moment would come, but I hadn't anticipated how agonizing it would be. "Mark, I don't want to hurt you, but I can't deny my feelings for Liam," I said, tears streaming down my cheeks. Mark nodded, his eyes filled with weariness, but also a quiet acceptance. "I understand," he said. "I won't force you, but I hope you know what you're doing." After that conversation, Liam and I decided to leave. Mark didn't try to stop us, but I knew he would never forgive us. As we drove away, Liam held my hand tightly. He looked at me, his eyes brimming with determination. "Sophia, I promise I'll do everything to make you happy," he said firmly. I nodded, my heart a whirlwind of emotions. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I had chosen the path my heart demanded. Mark stayed behind in that house, holding on to memories both beautiful and painful. I didn't know if he would ever move past what had happened, but I hoped he would find peace someday. As for Liam and me, we started a new life together, hoping that our love would be strong enough to withstand everything. But deep down, I knew the scars of this experience would never fully fade. I didn't expect forgiveness from anyone. This is my story, a tale of love, struggle, and mistakes. Life doesn't always follow a straight path, and I can only hope that through our missteps, we learn to find true happiness. If you were in my situation, how would you handle it? I really hope to receive your suggestions and solutions. Thank you so much.